Hello, welcome. My name is Dr. Pamela Jimenez, and I'm the Director of Programs for LUCA. I'm so excited to welcome you to Financial Aid Review Night and to welcome you to this training. In the following video, you will receive training for all that is Financial Aid Review Night. Financial Aid Review Night is LUCA's annual program event designed to support scholars and their families and to help them understand financial aid award letters in preparation for College Signing Day, which is typically every year, May 1st. So in the spring, we begin to host this event. We're excited to have you here. We're excited that you have volunteered. Anytime you volunteer with LUCA, we know that volunteers are the backbone of the work that we do. So we are especially happy and proud to have you here. In the following video, you will, it's designed to help you understand what we look for on Financial Aid Review Night and what we have you review with the family. So you sit with the family and you will review their top 3 financial aid award letters where the scholar would really want to go. You review everything out-of-pocket costs, loans, scholarships, what it all means, and from your best knowledge that you have, what costs certain things will be. So we just want to mention that this video was actually recorded a year ago. And so the only disclaimer that we have is that the interest rates for this year's loans won't come out until the middle of the summer. So we won't know that. So the family should absolutely understand that they should proceed with caution. And if there is a loan on their financial aid award letter, they should understand that perhaps they won't know the interest rate until the middle of the summer. So again, we can review anything with you. If you have any questions, please feel free to always reach out to me or one of the team members. I'm delighted and elated to have you here. Anytime we have volunteers volunteer in programming or any LUCA event, we're just so happy and feel so grateful for everything that you do. So happy training, and we cannot wait to see you on Financial Aid Review Night. Thank you.
Here at LUCA, our volunteers are our lifeline, and we really appreciate you taking the time and energy to do this. Our scholars wouldn't have gotten to this point without it. And those applications that they submitted are used by the schools in order for them to be able to qualify for aid. As you know, financial aid is a key component to the financial aid award letters. I mean, I would hope so. It's in the name, right? So we are going to discuss 4 main categories of financial aid that make up our award letters. Federal financial aid, state financial aid, institutional aid, which basically means that it is granted by the colleges and universities themselves, and other aid such as outside scholarships and private loans. We're going to delve a little deeper into what each one of these categories, the subcategories are. So starting off with federal student aid, these are some words that I can guarantee you will encounter on the financial aid award letters, starting with the Pell Grant. The Pell Grant is awarded to up to at a maximum of $7,395, and that amount can vary based off of the student's SAI, their student aid index, which is calculated by their economic need, their financial need, as well as what FAFSA determines. And then the next one that you might encounter is the FSEOG, and I'm saying the acronym first because typically this is what will show up on the financial aid award letter. But what the FSEOG stands for is the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. And that is a grant that is given based off of financial need. So those are scholars who have exceptional financial need. They have an SAI, student aid index number of a negative 1,500 or closer to that range. I will go into detail about what that means. And it's also in the resource guide in case you might have missed it or you need a little more details. And for the FSEOG, it's usually up to a maximum of $4,000. The minimum is $100,000. And Another thing that'll pop up on the award letter is the Federal Work Study Program. I will make a note that the Federal Work Study Program is ingrained into the financial aid award letter, but it doesn't go directly into, it doesn't get paid directly to the school. That is money that is given to the student based off of, well, through a paycheck, either direct deposit or paycheck. And what they choose to do with that money is really up to them. And the Federal Work Study Program can vary by school. It can go from $1,000 to $4,000 depending on the school, and it is often dispersed based off of the minimum wage of each school. And priority is given to the students with exceptional financial need and have completed their FAFSA. And the thing about that is that, or actually the thing about all of these are that students have to accept this financial aid. So they just have to make sure that they follow the next steps and continue on with it to make sure that they can continue with it. Sorry, I tried to skip to the next. And then this is a little controversial for some of our families. When they see the word loans, they do get a little scared. From my experience with them, the reason that they are scared of loans is they are afraid of their students taking on additional debt, as well as having any impact to their credit score. So it is important to note that for the federal loans, both direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans, they are a lot more flexible, and we do recommend these. So for the direct subsidized loan, for the first year of the student, so for the freshman, there is a maximum of $3,500 that they can take out. This number does increase as the student progresses throughout their college life, and the interest does not accumulate while the student is in school. The interest is around 6%, and the Department of Education does cover it. I know there is controversy about what's going on with the Department of Education, but this is as of right now, this information is current. And also the direct subsidized loan is offered to families that demonstrate financial need based off of FAFSA, compared to the direct unsubsidized loan, which is a maximum amount of $2,000. That number does not increase. It is always $2,000. And while the interest does accumulate while the student is in school, like I said, it's not that high of an interest compared to other private loans. And it is available to the students regardless of need. There may also be some federal loans, they're not as common, such as the nursing loan, or there's institutional loans as well, which I'll get into later. And so as for New York State aid, the one thing to consider is that this aid will only appear on financial aid award letters that are in New York State. The schools have to be located in New York State for that to be applicable. If you are looking at a school like Stanford, a financial aid award letter for Stanford, you are not going to find the tuition assistance program or the Excelsior Scholarship. So for New York State, there's two different kinds of aid that are more important, that are more likely to be encountered. The first one being the Tuition Assistance Program, or TAP. And for those, you can get up to $5,665. Again, that amount is based off of income. So depending on how much the family is making, that number may vary. And this is available to any college within New York State. Doesn't have to be a SUNY or CUNY. It can also be a private school, as long as it's residing in New York State. As for the Excelsior, this is only applicable for those who are in SUNY and CUNY colleges. And this is a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? So it's a little more flexible with our families, with a range of $125,000 of income, a combined income. And it is a last dollar tuition scholarship after all other tuition is applied. So this isn't something that's just going to come and cover the tuition. This is after, let's say the Pell Grant has been applied and there is still a cost of $2,000. So the Excelsior Scholarship is there to cover that additional $2,000. And so there is also that route for undocumented students. Unfortunately, our undocumented students are not eligible for the traditional route of financial aid. They are not eligible for FAFSA, and the route for TAP is a little different for them. If they are living in New York, our students are eligible for the Jose Peralta or the New York State Dream application. And this is the way that they are eligible for financial aid through the state. The first step for them is to fill out the Dream Act application. And then after the application is completed, they're then prompted to complete the TAP application, but that is through a application specifically for DACA and undocumented students. Our students met the eligibility requirements by graduating from a New York State high school, as well as being enrolled in a college within the next 5 years of them graduating. And then there are institutional grants and scholarships. So these, as I mentioned before, is the money that is given by the schools from the schools. And this money varies by the school. So how much you are getting from Stanford may differ from how much you are getting from Manhattanville. It's all based off of the school, their own criteria and awards, they determine it. We have no say in what they give, how they give it, and who they give it to. It is also, they also give it based off of merit or need or both. So if you see multiple scholarships, one saying it is a honors scholarship and another one being a financial needs scholarship, all of those are applicable. They, like I said, they give their own requirements. And they also may require additional applications. As I mentioned before, our scholars completed the CSS profile for a lot of the schools that required it. And there are also some school-specific scholarship forms that they give to the students for them to be able to be eligible for financial aid through the institution. And a lot of these scholarships that are given are also renewable. Well, they can be renewable. The best practice is to contact the financial aid office to confirm what criteria is what are the terms for the renewal. So whether or not they have to maintain a certain GPA, like a 3.0, or if they have to maintain in the same program, it is all dependent on the school. So what I didn't touch upon earlier, I will touch upon here, and that is also institutional loans. Those qualify under private loans as well. So it can be from banks, private lenders, and those are including the institutions, and those are for the students. Private loans and alternative loans are not loans that we at LUCA necessarily recommend, because this is what the parents fear the most. So the high interest rates that may exceed 10%, co-signers may be required for this, and it does take a toll on the student's credit because it is being checked, as well as repayment is not as flexible as federal loans. So for federal loans, which I forgot to touch upon, I'm sorry. So for federal loans, there are repayment options. There's also forgiveness. So if you are, for example, a teacher in New York State, after a certain amount of time, your loan can be forgiven. There are different criteria that need to be met in order for that to be forgiven, but repayment is more flexible with federal loans. And unfortunately, with private loans, there is no forgiveness option. So no matter what you do, how you get to that point, unfortunately, you do have to pay it back under the terms of the banks and the private lenders, and they're not as kind. And there's also another loan that's technically a federal loan, but again, it's an alternative one. We don't really recommend it. And this would be the Parent Plus loan or the Direct Plus loan, in which the parent is the borrower. The parents will get a credit check and they have to have good credit to be eligible for it. And the current interest rate is about 9.8%, so almost 10%. And this will usually come as part of the award package. So keep an eye out for that. It'll come and it'll be a very large total, and it will typically cover the rest of the gap that is there for the scholars. So if you see like a $39,000 package loan and it says Direct Plus, just know that it's to be concerned.
Steph. So I will continue. And again, thank you, Steph, for that deep dive into types of student aid that we can expect to see on award letters and for questions to rise from. In this section, we're gonna go into how we use that information, the terms, and into helping our families read, evaluate, and compare those offers. So we're gonna begin with simply starting with the fact that most students are not expected to pay the full cost of attendance. And this is what we refer to as a sticker price. So families are coming in asking who pays what, right? And they want to understand and be clear on what is the college paying for? What are the scholarships that my son or daughter has received, and what will we end up paying, right, out of pocket, or borrow, right? So while they're not expected to pay the full cost of attendance, they have at this point completed, as Stephanie mentioned, some type of financial aid application. They've either completed FAFSA, TAP, CSS profile, all of which, after submitting results, and produces an estimate of what families can contribute towards the cost of attendance at a particular college. So a school's estimate of what a family should pay most often differs from what a family feels they can afford. And so this is something important for us to keep in mind. Now, some of us may wonder, how does a college determine need? Our families will ask, how does a college determine need? That's always a question at the forefront. And so this graphic here helps us understand that a little better. So the cost of attendance, as mentioned, is a sticker price, what is usually advertised online as being the final cost for a student to attend that institution for that particular year. And after completing financial aid applications, a family contribution estimate is produced. So colleges will use that information to ultimately determine the family's eligibility for federal, state, and institutional aid. As we mentioned earlier, there are caps to grants, such as the Pell Grant, such as the TAP grant, even Excelsior. And so with that being said, they use that information to determine how much the family truly needs. And with that being said, every student's award letter will look different. So the amount that one family is receiving for Pell will be completely different from the next family. And the same applies for TAP. So and I bring this up because scholars will compare award packages with their peers and say, well, you got X amount, why am I not receiving the same amounts? And so there's an algorithm, right, that goes into these award letters that I wanted to share. I mentioned cost of attendance, right? And that's a sticker price that colleges put out there on their website and on these award letters. And so it consists of two parts. It consists of, first, what is referred to as direct costs. These are billable expenses that colleges expect to receive, right, to cover services. And those are typically and immediately tuition and fees. So cost of the classes to be a full-time student. All of our students will be full-time students. And if they have intentions on living on campus, or this is an out-of-state school, then they have to consider housing and meals, correct? And lastly, miscellaneous fees. Now, miscellaneous fees often refers to student health insurance, um, student activity fees, and oftentimes administrative fees. So again, these are direct costs for schools such as one where the student is commuting, right, to the school, the typical expenses that the direct costs that they will not see and will not have to factor and plan for would be the housing and meals. But for students that will be resident students on campus, all three will be their direct costs, billable expenses. So that's one part of that makes up the cost of attendance. The other part is indirect costs. So costs that are not billed to families, but often are part of an award letter. And these are more of reference figures, reference numbers intended to help families plan ahead for and budget. And these indirect costs refer to transportation, books and supplies, and personal expenses. So while they are not billed by the college, it's wise for families to have these numbers in front of them so that they can plan ahead. And if it helps them make a decision on whether or not they need to borrow money, right? Or look into other resources to account for these indirect costs. To give you an example of these direct and indirect costs, we're looking here at SUNY Binghamton and the figures that they have put out there for the academic year 2025-2026. So we broke this down, gathered this on this table so that you can see that here the total cost of attendance for a first year student for the academic year 2025-26 is $32,044. That's a combination of their direct costs, which we see here broken down $30,044, and their total indirect costs $2,000. Now, what I would like to add here is that some award letters don't include this important section, this informative section for families to make sense of what financial aid they're receiving versus what is the cost of attendance, and how they can make a decision if they have enough money, they were offered enough money funds to cover the cost of attendance. This next example shows us NYU. This tends to be NYU gratefully receives and admits a good number of our scholars, so we can expect to see NYU somewhere in that mix. And their cost of attendance for the year 25-26 is $93,184. Now, NYU breaks down their direct cost by tuition and fees and housing and meals, whereas the example before broke down the direct costs even further and separated fees from tuition. So we'll see colleges get creative in how they categorize their direct costs. And I wanted to show here how that can happen. Direct costs here, $87,448, and indirect, $5,737. Now, once our volunteers, once you're sitting and meeting with our families, and there you have either hard copy or digital copy of those award letters, the next step is, and what will be helpful is this list of questions, right? We believe it's worth having here and going through. And one of the first question is, how much will year one at X college costs? And by year one, I'm referring to the year 2025, 2026. How much will it cost? And if it's on the award letter, then we know we should compare the direct cost and the indirect cost. It's important to identify and distinguish between those billable expenses. If they are not there for any particular reason, we encourage you to help the scholar look on the college's website for the year 2025, 2026 to locate this information. If it's not available on the award letter. After that information is gathered, take a look at the award letter, right? And ask, what type of student aid was this scholar offered? Do we see federal aid? Is this a New York State school where they offered TAP, institutional aid, loans? Take a look at that award letter. And once that information is gathered, anticipate families asking, how much will they have to pocket, right? How much money will they have to pay out of their own resources, right? And that will be the difference between the cost of attendance and student aid that they were offered. The remaining, if there's any remaining amount, any difference between those figures, that in financial aid lingo is referred to as the net cost. Our families and scholars know that and hear the word gap to refer to the net cost. And we'll use that interchangeably as well through tonight's training. And finally, once our families are aware of if there's any gap that they're facing, and they may be taken aback with how much the college is expecting them to contribute, take a moment and say, okay, let's compare this with the next award letter, and continue that process until you've gone through the 35 award letters for that scholar. And we'll go into the award letter comparison tool, which is designed to help in that comparison process. Here's an example of an award letter that most colleges are moving towards to standardize all award letters. While colleges have a marketing approach to how they present award letters, most institutions have this standard award letter that they sometimes embed into a student's portal. And it's a nice way, and it can help you assist students through the process. This will be a reference tool that you'll have access to. As we see here, I'm not sure if we can see my cursor move on the screen, but I'm looking at the left side, the student name. So this is University of the United States, UUS, right? This is a sample. One of the first things, right, that we want to do is make sure that this award letter does, in fact, belong to the students. Last year, I think we had a scholar who received an award letter, and we realized that night that it wasn't designed for her. Financial aid office mistakenly sent that award letter to her, and it wasn't the right one. So first thing is first is make sure that it is for that student. Right after that, there is a segment, total cost of attendance for the year 2025, 2026. Should be for that year, and it'll break it down in that manner, followed by student aid index, which is the updated version of EFC, what FAFSA used to use as an estimate for a family's contribution, and followed by scholarships, grants, and in the middle, as we see in green, the net price, the net cost, right? And as some families will refer to this as the gap, Um, so I want to move on and show you an actual award letter, right? This award letter comes from Mercy, right? And let's see, what do we, question for you all. What are some buzzwords that you can identify in this award letter? And I'm looking at the left side of, of the award letter. So the bottom half, we'll see grants and scholarships that this scholar was offered.
Trying to blow it up.
I'm sorry, yeah, it's quite small. So you see Pell Grant right here. So this scholar in particular was offered a Pell Grant, and it's in the amount of 7,395. And if I recall correctly, Steph, that is the max, right? Is it the max?
Yes, that's the maximum that they can receive.
Okay, so we know that that this student's family demonstrated a high need for financial aid, so they were offered a maximum Pell Grant. Another type of student aid that they have been that they demonstrate eligibility for is the New York TAP grants. And here I see, I'm also squinting a little bit, 5,665. So again, the max. While not exactly a rule of thumb, we can, and I have seen patterns in this type of financial aid where the student demonstrates a high need and receives the full or somewhat of a max Pell Grant, they will oftentimes also receive maximum TAP grants. Again, not a rule of thumb. It's not a given, but that's what we can expect. And again, Mercy being a college within New York State, did offer the students New York TAP. This other sample here comes from Fordham. So Fordham, as I mentioned earlier, colleges get creative in their marketing approach for award letters, and so the aesthetic is a little different. But what we can count on here also is we see that this scholar received an FSCOG grant, a federal supplemental educational opportunity grant for the amount of $1,000. We see similar student aid, I see Pell Grants, I see TAP grants. Now, I also see student aid that with titled Fordham Metro Grants. And so that can be expected from private institutions that have resources to package our families with additional student aid, and grants are need-based. That's a given. Whenever we see the word grants, we should think the student's family demonstrated need, so they are receiving it. Other families, other institutions may exhaust all their grants, and so not all students can will be awarded a grant. But in this case, this student here was awarded a total of $49,061 in grants and scholarships. So we know this is money that does not have to be repaid, right? And here in this example, Fordham also broke down and provided the family with information on their tuition and fees, which here they're referring to as their direct charges. In other words, their direct costs. Indirect costs, book supplies, they broke that down for the family as well. And ultimately, they did the work for the family to give them their net cost, and that is $18,875. What's unique about this award letter from Fordham is that we don't see residential expenses, right? Living on campus, meal plans. correct? And that is another item to keep in mind as we're reviewing award letters is that the student may have been packaged as a commuter student, which was the case in this award letter. And if the student has a change of heart or would like to be considered as a residential student, they have the opportunity to reach out to the financial aid office, and get an estimate from them as a residential student. So some of these awards may be replaced by others. This next example, we see, what do we see here? What are some terms, awards that we see the scholar receiving?
I would like to point out that Haiti mentioned indirect and direct costs. So sometimes it may not appear that way on these financial aid award letters. For example, here it says costs payable to the school or billable expenses. Those are direct costs. So it's worded differently, but that's basically what they're saying. As well as costs paid to others or additional expenses, those are indirect costs. It's just, again, worded differently.
Thanks, Steph, for that. Again, the aesthetic varies from school to school. And so deciphering these award letters, it is not always the easiest. So presenting you with these examples is a way to warm you up on what you can expect that evening from our scholars and from the institutions that admitted them. So this here is actually an example of quite a package, because from what we see here, they were packaged really, really well. We see that the cost of attendance is 92,000 versus their total grants and scholarships, 81,000. So the net price here is 11. Now that net price is followed by loans and work study. And this is a strategic way for colleges to demonstrate, show families that those are their options to cover that net cost. And so that's where the loans and work study kick in. As Stephanie mentioned, loans and including work study are not a given. The student does have to go through the process of accepting partial or full amount of those awards and follow through with paperwork involved, to claim that fund, and requires additional follow-up throughout the year as well.
Hey, Haiti, quick question for you. So those numbers for the loans and the work study, are those guaranteed if they accept the amounts, or is there an application process?
The application was the FAFSA.
Okay, so if they want that money, it's there for them. They just have to ask for it. Got it.
They have to, yep. They have to, again, this is an offer. All of the awards here are offered, and they have to say yes. Online, they
Right.
have to, there's usually a text box for them to indicate if they are claiming the full loan, and if not, what part of the loan they are asking for. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, clearly you want to take the federal work study because that's an award. It's not a loan, right? So that's
Correct.
one thing we will make sure that they understand as we're going through this with them. The other two, we can always make sure they understand that they're optional. It's there if they need it. If they think they can cover it, they don't have to borrow the money.
Correct. Absolutely.
So how do the subsequent years, I realize that they're going to need to fill out a FAFSA for subsequent years, and assuming their family income stays fairly stable over the course, are they to assume that they're going to get a similar percent of coverage in subsequent years?
That's correct. That's a great point, Robin. And that's a principle that financial aid offices work with, to stabilize and and package students for future years. So yes, we know that award cost of attendance does increase by a certain percentage every year, and because of that, they have to factor in how um, institutional aid will increase again to stay within that percentage.
But once they get most of this, I mean, unless it says something is specific to a one time, I don't know if there are even one-time payments or freshman year only, but they could presume that it's going to look, if their out of pocket or their gap is $5,000, they could pretty much presume that over the course of 4 years, assuming that they're, you know, a full-time student and then GPAs are fine and all that, that they would get a similar amount.
Right.
The gap would
That's
be
right, Rob.
similar year to year.
Yeah, that's right. All right.
I think Richard has his hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. Is the
Yep.
work study somewhat misleading in that if it appears there, that they're saying if you do work study, you'll be able to use this to pay off the tuition. But the reality is most kids who do work study are using those funds to kind of just live. Like you have living expenses. So
That's right.
if a kid is awarded work study, I wouldn't say, hey, count this towards your tuition.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I appreciate that you're nodding yes, Stephanie, but can you share a little more on that?
Yeah, so I actually have an example. We have a scholar who got accepted into UVA. His out-of-pocket expense right now is 7,000, and that is before loans. So the one thing that I did mention and I subtracted from it was the work study. So I explained to him and mom that work study is a paycheck. That is like you are working. So that is money that is not going directly to the school. They are giving it to you. What you choose to do with that money is based off of you. If you want to put it and apply it towards your education, that is on you. But as you mentioned, oftentimes a lot of the scholars use it as pocket money to fund, their expenses, especially if they're residential. Oftentimes they don't work outside of campus. It's a lot easier to work in campus as they are more flexible. So that is usually the option. They use that to afford, the toiletries that they need, or, if they want to go to the movies or do something with their friends, that is usually where that money goes to.
I'm here looking at the channel. My apologies. Did that answer your question, Richard? Taking that as yes. Okay. All right. This last example of an award letter is one that I want to point out because it can be, and I remember receiving something similar to this. Used to be mailed out, right? And we had to check off, say yes or no, as we see on the far right here, if the student would like to receive that type of financial student aid. But there's also information that we don't see here, right? And that is the breakdown of the direct and indirect costs and also the net cost, right? So should we come across an award letter such as this, we encourage you to look and refer to their to the email that the student must have received from the university, giving them instructions on how to access this award letter, which should contain a link to their financial aid webpage. And that's where we can locate that information for the year 2025, 2026, in order to get the full picture of what the award letter means for the scholar and their family. Again, our families are the burning question, and the reason they will be attending award financial aid review night is to know how much are we going to have to pay, right? And so there are two primary ways, two avenues in which our families are approaching and making sense of these award letters. And so the net cost for some families, they will consider, they know grants and scholarships and the amounts they were offered in terms of student loans, and that is if there's any net cost, any gap, missing funds that to cover the cost of attendance, the family is then plans ahead with that figure. If should the student or family be on the fence of student loans and they only want to consider the grants and scholarships, or as we refer to it as gift aid, then we subtract that from the cost of attendance and that becomes a family's net cost, the gap for that family. Both are definitely options for the family to consider for each school. Presenting this here to you all. Again, if a family is on the fence on borrowing money, I encourage you to reach out and advise a student to reach out to Stephanie after the event for more information and direction on and clarity on borrowing money. Now, again, what happens if there is a gap, right? Additional resources that the student and family can look to is scholarships, federal loans. It could be resourceful. It could help fill in that gap. Again, and I want to reiterate what Richard mentioned earlier. Work study is not a reliable way to fill a gap. It's students and sometimes even financial aid offices will point it out and say, hey, well, we're offering you work study. That's one way to cover what you're missing. But the reality is that that's really meant to cover personal expenses. And it's not that they're receiving this money all up front in a large lump sum. They have to work those hours to receive that money. There are ways that we advise on bridging the gap. First is an appeal letter. An appeal letter is a letter to a specific financial aid office at a college where the student is requesting a reevaluation of their family circumstances that they may have not had a chance to put on and make known through FAFSA, TAP, CSS applications. And so they're again requesting that their family's financial circumstances be reevaluated, and often it's a way to negotiate with the college, and some students will use another college's offer to find a middle ground and hopefully get a better offer in institutional aid or additional merit-based scholarships that the institution may have available for them. With appeal letters, I will say the student, this is a conversation to have with Stephanie, because this shouldn't be applied and not a blanket strategy, right? The students is not going to send an appeal letter to all of the colleges. This is a strategic way of receiving a better offer from the contending, their preferred option, preferred college offer. Another way to bridge the gap is definitely to remember that there are other avenues such as scholarships that are available on a rolling basis and are that we encourage scholars to apply throughout their entire college journey, right? Now, that's not a guarantee, right? But it's definitely a way for them to plan ahead for future years, as well as knowing that most colleges have payment plan options. Payment plan options allow families to cover the cost, the net cost or the gap into a series of installments that help them cover that gap by semester or by the timeline that they use. Sometimes colleges go by quarters. So they may offer a payment plan. Again, the purpose of Financial Aid Review Night is for them to compare, right? So we would like to advise families to look into an offer that makes sense to them, that is realistic, that they can sustain until the scholar graduates, and not to accumulate debt will make it challenging for the scholar as a future adult. And I pass on the baton to Stephanie.
You, Haiti. So another way, Haiti just showed you financial aid award letters. We have also encouraged our scholars to fill in their financial aid trackers. So some of them may come in with their laptops and pull this fancy looking spreadsheet out. And so I'm going to break it down to you because first look, it's pretty overwhelming. I will say that. So the first part of the financial aid tracker is the cost of attendance. As we have mentioned before, it is the combination of both the direct and indirect costs here. So that is what it shows here. It is broken down basically line by line. So the scholars have been encouraged to input their top 5 schools and break it down for you. So it makes it a lot easier for you as the volunteers to kind of just review everything there. So it calculates what the tuition, the fees, and the housing and meals would be for those who are either dorming or, if they are living at home with their parents, such as for the student doing CUNY Lehman. It changes. So we have, let's see, Manhattanville. It is a private, Oswego, New Paltz, which are both SUNYs, but the student would be living residentially. We have St. John's, and then we have Lehman, as mentioned. So that is our breakdown. And as you can see, the books and the supplies, the transportation expenses, and the miscellaneous personal expenses, the indirect costs, those have all been factored in here. So if at any point it gets a little crazy and the parents are just like, wait, I don't understand, what is this number? You can show them the division. The top is the indirect cost. The bottom is, the top is the direct cost. The bottom is the indirect cost. And then that is how we calculate that very big number, the total cost of attendance, which can vary anywhere from $5,000 to like $20,000, depending on the school. Thank you, Haiti. And so then on this section, this is where they input all of these scholarships and loans. So for this scholar, they seem to have gotten a pretty good amount from each school. So it includes, again, it'll automatically populate the direct cost, so you don't have to go and input anything. This should automatically populate. That's that top yellow line. And from there, it'll subtract the federal Pell Grants, depending on how much a scholar got. Here, they got the full Pell Grant from each school. The FSEOG, or the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, that doesn't look that high from this scholar, but that, again, it varies from school to school, and it is need-based. And then the New York State Tuition Assistance Program, it's broken down as well. It also calculates New York State grants such as HEOP, EOP, SEEK, and the CD grants, which are all programs, additional programs that the student has to apply for during the application process. Not every scholar is eligible for it, so not everybody's going to have it. And we also calculate other school grants, such as the institutional grants and things like that. So at the bottom, that green line is the total grants and scholarships. Again, you have to do absolutely no work. If they're inputting everything, it automatically populates. It does all of the math for you. No need to whip out a calculator. And then it also includes, again, it breaks it down. So if parents have questions about where this number is coming from, it should make it a little bit more easier for you. It also populates the federal loans. So you put in how much they have received for their federal loans, and then it tells you how much they should be paying out of pocket after the loans have been applied. So that is our last line right there, the total financial aid.
Stephanie, the students that qualify for the Excelsior Scholarship, that's not going to show up on any award letter, obviously, but how do they know they qualify? How do they know? Some of them, I don't think, even know about it. So who informs them? How does that work?
So they have to apply for it. It is an application process. Depending on whether or not the school has given it to them, it may appear later on their financial aid award letters, but that is once that has been they have gone through the process of application, which the application opened in the spring. And so it may not populate here.
Right. So
It will populate later.
is it worthwhile for if we see somebody applying to, Oswego and New Paltz, CUNY, Lehman, I mean, we don't know if they qualify, right? Because we're not looking at their FAFSA, but you can make some assumptions. Should we encourage them should we let them know about the scholarship and say you should find out if you qualify and apply if you do?
They might.
It's
Oh, sorry.
possible. It's possible that they qualify. There are some hints that we can pick up here and there to determine if
Right.
they qualify for it. So for example, given that example you presented, Anthony, at Oswego, we know what their tuition cost is, right? If
Right.
if that award letter gives us information on Pell Grant and TAP, and we see through this tracker that there is still a gap to cover tuition, then that's a hint that they are eligible for Excelsior. That's a hint, but not a given, right? So if
Right.
we see that, if we notice that, it's worth bringing up and saying, hey, you might want to check in with Steph on the Excelsior. The Excelsior tends to open up quite late in the spring. And so at this moment, I'm not quite sure if it's available for this cohort, but it's one that's completed after TAP. They don't have to create a separate account or anything. It's tied together with their TAP account. It's quite simple actually. But those are hints that we can pick up here and there
That we
for
can,
SUNY and
and we can,
CUNYs.
and we can basically say, it looks like you might qualify for Excelsior. You should look into it, and because if you qualify, you should apply.
Correct.
Haiti and Stephanie, I have a question when Anthony's finished.
Oh, so that's okay. So, because I think, in the past, I think I've done that a couple of times, and the students look at me like, what's Excelsior? They don't even know about it, which is unfortunate. But we should at least let them know about it if we think they might qualify and have them look into it. I guess, did you say they should call Stephanie, or should they deal with their counselors?
To me.
We encourage them to let the first touch point be with Stephanie.
Okay. Okay, good.
And again, there'll be QR codes that evening that they can select a follow-up meeting right away.
Okay. One last question on the Excelsior is, if you do qualify for it, do they cover whatever the gap is, or is there a cap?
They will cover whatever remaining amount is needed to cover tuition.
Just tuition.
Only tuition.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Becky, you had a question.
Okay, so let's go down to additional ways to pay this bill, part 1. I just want to make sure I understand this. So the billable gap in total is 5,190. I'm under Manhattanville. They're taking out loans in the amount of $4,215, which means that's what they're going to have to take loans out. But even with the loans, there will be a gap of $975 that will be an out-of-pocket expense that will have to be dealt with not immediately, but within the course of the school year. That is a total out-of-pocket expense. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I understand that.
Yes,
Okay,
you're following.
nodding.
Yes.
I'm good. Okay,
You're following, Becky. I'm like, Steph, do you want to take this or?
Sorry, yeah, I
want-
was just like, I don't know if Haiti wants to jump in or not. So I was just like, no.
Oh, I thought you were nodding that I said it right. Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure. And the other thing is, we are going under the assumption that our students have plugged in this information, or that they have provided it to you and Luca has plugged in this information, because I know my scholars is totally empty and I know she's gotten awards. So that goes on along with Anthony's thing and also with the Excelsior that Deborah has sent out a letter just letting us know that it's out there and it exists. And if they need any verbiage that we can assist them on that. So can you expand on that a little bit about the functionality of this form and who's responsible of filling it out?
So the scholars are supposed to be the ones who are filling out the tracker. This is an attachment to their overall college trackers.
Right, I've seen it.
So if
With
this
that being
applies to
said,
your scholar, yeah, I would encourage you to nudge them and say,
Okay.
well, one, ask them, did you sign up for financial aid review nights? And we can tell you, right, if they did, and if not,
Yeah.
that's step one. And then two, if they are registered for this event, they should be populating this in preparation for that night. Of course, not 100% of our scholars are perfect in keeping up with their tracker. We understand. So we can expect some of our scholars to be working through this tracker that evening.
Okay.
My experience
you.
last year was I don't think I had one that actually had put anything into the tracker. And that included time spent going on to the websites of these colleges and finding the cost information, which was actually fairly time consuming, unfortunately, because it's sometimes not very apparent where, once you get to the college website, where all of this information resides. So I would definitely say if you've got your own student, try to encourage your student to do it because it makes the whole evening go more quickly for everybody. But unfortunately, the ones, at least the 3 or 4 I helped last year, nobody came with anything populated, and it took quite some time to fill it all out and help them to understand and compare it, to the actual cost of the college. So,
Right. And I do recall that, Robin, last year. So what we're doing this year differently is one, nudging our scholars, right, to populate this in preparation for the event. Those that are here and those that will view this at some point before the financial aid review night, we certainly encourage you to check in with your scholar, if you have a scholar, right, and ask them to populate this, right? And we'll also be checking in with the registration list and nudging those students so that they're prepared as well.
I have also accounted for the fact that they potentially will have nothing there. They will also have a worksheet that is similar to this. Unfortunately, they will be having to do work, and please, I encourage them to do the work. I don't want you sitting there with your hand cramping up because you're writing everything down for them. And I know that is on them. This was their responsibility. While I know you guys are amazing and wonderful, please remember that, it's their responsibility.
And with that being said, remember this is a 45-minute session, so it's possible that it's not enough time for that scholar, right? Especially if we have all slots, which we intend to for that night. And so if that's the case, please advise them to follow up with Stephanie, who will carve out more time to go through those. But this is a great starting point for families. Should I move on, Steph?
I wanted to bring up one more point here. So I don't know if anybody noticed the negative under the CUNY-Lehman section. So it is entirely possible that after inputting all of the financial aid, that there will be a negative. And as you can see, this scholar has not even applied the federal loans. At this point, that is optional. But if you see a negative, it is possible that they will be receiving a refund in the form of a check or direct deposit, depending on how they register for it. And that'll be through the school. And another thing to note with that is there's no specific date as to when they will be receiving that money. So I know when I was in college, there were people who were expecting their spring refunds right before spring break. They're just like, I will be receiving it. I will be receiving it. That's not always the case.
And they can do what they want with that money. There's no encumbrance to that money.
They could do whatever they want with that money. But I will advise the following. It's recommended, and I've always recommended students in the past to save that money. Why? Should they, for whatever reason, first year um is a culture shock, right? With transitioning from high school to college, they anticipate the style to be very similar to high school, and sometimes they don't pass a class, right? They'll have to retake the class. And newsflash, sometimes student aid does not pay for a retake of a certain class. So what can they do? They can retake the class, but they'll have to pay for it out of pocket. They can use that money to retake the class. So just thinking ahead of situations that tend to happen. I haven't seen this happen at Luca, but just out of prior experience working with first generation college students.
Also, I would second that, but I also think that there's lots of expenses that aren't necessarily anticipated. And I think some of those estimations on books is pretty optimistic that they would only spend $1,000 in a school year on books, especially if they're in a science. So, those are just estimates from the school and may not really play out as they anticipate in the real world.
Great point.
That is also very true. So again, that money, it is up to the student to decipher what they would like to do with it. It's really not up to us to recommend it. To be like, hey, this is what you have to do. We can recommend, we can't force them to do anything with it.
Next slide.
Yes, please, sorry. So another thing that we calculated, and as you have noticed, there is a little gray tab kind of dividing everything. So this is where the work study gets calculated. The student has not populated their estimated money per week. So in this section, they put in how much they were offered for work study. And again, it calculates it on its own. So let's say, for example, this student was offered $3,000. It is, there are an average of about 32 weeks per school year. So that is broken down further into the state's minimum wage. And by state, we mean New York State. It may differ depending on other schools and where they're located. But for example, here it would be 16. So 32 and 16, we break that down. Because the student did not put how many hours they wanted to work, we can't really decipher what they would be earning per week, but it is broken down by that. For example, it really differs based off of the student, their schedule, and what they feel comfortable working. So one student may say that they only want to work 5 hours a week because their schedule is packed. They can only allow that far. And then some may say 15. It's really ambitious, but it really just depends on them. And I think each school has their
they're
own cap.
capped. Yeah, they have their own cap. The most common cap I've seen is 12 hours.
So that is also a thing to consider. While they might want to work 30 hours a week, most schools cap at 12.
Next slide.
Yes. And then here's another section which includes the no-nos, which are the federal Parent Plus loan, and this is where that gets calculated into it. Apparently, the scholar had it on their financial aid award letter, so they are offered $69,000, $6,500, and $9,392 on their financial aid award letter. That can also be calculated, but again, we don't really recommend that for our families. And then after all is said and done, after all is calculated, that final number down there is what they would pay out of pocket if they accept every single loan, everything that they are provided. And so that is a number that we will base off of, well, that we will help them base their decision off of. And I say help, not give them a decision. So we are just helping guide them towards making an informed decision. Whether they want to take the most expensive school, that is on them. Whether they want to get a return, that is also on them. It really depends on the family, what they decide, and what they establish they can pay out of pocket.
I
So
have a
this is
question. If we
Sure.
get asked this, I don't know if they would ask us, are any of these costs deductible on their income taxes?
Great question. I actually don't know the answer to at this moment.
Can you
If I
find out just in case somebody asks, I mean, I'm not an accountant, so I can't answer that question. But if somebody says to me, well, I'm taking out all these loans, is any of this tax deductible? What about the out-of-pocket expenses and things like that? I don't know, but that comes to mind.
That is a really good question, Becky. We hadn't considered it, but I will definitely get back to you because that is an absolute possibility.
Okay.
And so this is the overall financial aid award comparison chart. Like I said, it's very overwhelming. That's why I broke it up piece by piece before presenting the whole thing. I didn't want to scare you off, but this is what it looks like. So
More like a calculator for families and students.
yeah, so it breaks everything down. What they have to do, which is why we recommend them doing this instead, is input the numbers. They don't have to lift a finger. They don't have to whip out a calculator. They don't have to do any math. It's just plugging everything in and determining a number.
And it doesn't have to, they don't have to have 5 schools. If they're only considering 2, then those are the 2 that they're populating. If it's 3, then 3. But we find that 5 is a manageable amount of schools among the ones that they've applied to and were admitted. So if they arrive and have 10 award letters, we would nudge them and say, okay, so which 5 do we want to go through first?
Which is also a really good point because as the financial aid award letters are coming in, I have seen a lot of scholars have more than 5, which congratulations to them. That's amazing. But also we need them to narrow it down a bit to be able to determine what a right choice would be for them.
Hey, can I ask a question? I know many of the scholars will apply not just to one SUNY, but multiple SUNYs. So there's like one app. Let's say they apply to 4 SUNYs. Will their financial aid look the same across all 4, or each college will give them different amounts?
So the general aid might look very similar. But each school does give its own aid. So for example, SUNY Plattsburgh gave a scholar a nursing loan, and they had they also had a nursing grant. Whereas the same student in Buffalo didn't really receive much for nursing, but they got a merit scholarship. So it really is all dependent on the school. It should look similar, but also as well as the tuition and the housing, meals, like the direct costs may also vary from school to school. The more popular schools tend to have a little higher of a price tag.
Cool, thank you.
There is a question someone submitted through the chat that I want to make sure that is addressed. Let me just pull that up. It was related to Loans. Robin,
Mhm.
you pose a question. Do students have to state before the school year that they want to borrow, or can they come back during the school year if they don't have enough to cover costs? Um, I've seen students after declining altogether student loans have a change of heart, or families come back and say, actually, we're gonna have to borrow some of that loan, and colleges are welcome that. They can still move forward with borrowing at any point during the year.
Okay, great.
Typically, under those circumstances, the best way to proceed is to reach out to financial aid at the financial aid department at the school and discuss how they can get the loans.
I just wondered because I didn't know if it was kind of you have to raise your hand at the beginning or it kind of goes away. But usually, if they're making 9% interest, they're happy to lend you money.
Right. Now, the interest rate is something else to consider, right? Because at the moment, undergrad interest rates are are fixed
Fixed.
up until a date. So for this cohort, the interest rate is locked in up until July 1st. After July 1st, those interest rates are reevaluated and increase, right? May increase. So what's good about the good thing about federal loans is that the interest rate is locked in for the lifetime of that loan.
But they also could be out of luck if the interest rates fall and now they're paying 9%, but that's the gamble they'd have to take, right? Like any kind of loan.
And that 9%, I believe, was the parent,
The
the
parent
parent
plus
plus
loan,
the
yeah.
Okay, well, again, they have to cross that bridge if they think they need a loan.